Everyone, I'm here actually making a tutorial video of a base that I had created recently for one of my AdMech. It's a Tech Priest Dominus. I actually kind of made a base that looks more, I was tired of the, sandstorm, sand dune sort of look to them. Kind of want to do something else. So I made a base that was more kind of nuclear wasteland sort of thing. Kind of looks a little glowy, kind of looks a little green, but mostly black. And there were some skulls and stuff like that. So I'm making a tutorial video on how to make that base or how I processed it. I'm going to be making it on like a 25mm square base on this one because that was the only base I had laying around right now. The Tech Priest Dominus I believe comes on a 30 or 40mm base, so it's a little easier to make it on the bigger ones, but we'll try on the smaller ones. It should work. So yeah, let's give it a shot. Alright guys, so as you can see we got our base right here. It's kind of a base I had laying around. As you see, it did have the slot in it. Normally I would choose a base that didn't have a slot in this. So what I did actually, I took some sticky tack, kind of the stuff that you kind of put on the walls there, and I just filled in the holes and stuff like that. I just made sure I got all the excess off so it doesn't stick and slides, and it's a smooth surface. So we should be good. Really, it's kind of simple. You don't need a whole lot. What I've got, just got some cork. It's not really super thick. I mean, I got a roll of this stuff at my local craft store for a couple bucks, and I mean it's got a whole giant roll of it. So, I mean, super cheap, super worth it. I've got just super glue. I mean, just normal ass super glue that we're going to use to glue the actual cork down. And then I got Mod Podge, which is basically a sealer sort of. It's basically PVA. It's a little thinner. Definitely worth it though. And then what I've got too, I've got a skeleton bit. It's a skull. Really, I think you can use any bit. I don't think it really matters. You can mix it up. I have the skeletons. I just had extras lying around and stuff like that, so I'm just going to use the skulls. So we'll get started. First things first, I'm going to glue the skull down to the base. So I kind of want to get that situated to where it needs to be before I get everything else down. So now most of this is going to get cleared up, so I'm just kind of put it pretty much anywhere I want. Get it stuck down there. That looks pretty good. So most of this is going to get cleared up by the PVA and the cork. So you got our little guy there. Sorry, the camera's kind of blurry, but I'm doing my best. Alright, so we'll let that dry for a hot second. So then what we're going to do with the cork is we're going to kind of layer it. You want to leave gaps in between. So, things I ripped off a couple pieces here, just kind of. So we want to leave gaps in between spaces. We're going to use Mod Podge to fill that kind of stuff up. So it'll be kind of something like this is kind of my plan. I'll keep it like this. We're going to cut off the excess so it's not too big of a deal. What I was doing is I was kind of using this cork for like a sort of cobblestone type feel to it. So that is kind of the plan for that. So I'll kind of show you what here. Let me scroll this down a little bit. Alright, so then we're going to go ahead and glue this down. The super glue doesn't take too long to dry, so glue that down there. There, I guess. It doesn't matter if you have excess, because again, it's going to get covered up by the Mod Podge, so not really that big of a deal. We'll glue it down just like that. So I'm going to move this one here, because I kind of don't want the square edges too much, which we can also fix that as well. So we'll let that dry, and then I will be back and we'll fill it in with Mod Podge, and I'll show you what to do with that. Alrighty, so the super glue should be dry enough. I also propped it up just so we can see it a little better. So first things first, though, I'm going to trim off these bits that are kind of laying off the side of it. I'm just going to follow the curvature of the base just to kind of have it follow the same pattern. Sawing off a little bit at a time until it's kind of flush with the base, just like that. See how it's flush there? So we're going to do the same thing over here. Just go slow on this, there's no reason to rush. So, and if it's jagged, that's actually pretty good. You don't want it to look like it's fresh, because, well, it's meant to not look fresh. And we're just following the curvature of the base. You scrape a little bit of the base off, it's not too big of a deal. Last one here. And there you go. So now we got a little base. There's the skull head. There's the what is going to be cobblestone, essentially. So now we need to fill in. We'll take this away for now. So we're going to fill in these gaps with this Mod Podge. Now I don't water it down, and I actually use a pretty big brush. I'm using actually a size 6. You can see just kind of any old brush that you got. You don't want to use anything good. I picked up a pack of like 50 brushes at Walmart for like $2. It was more than sufficient for this. So what you're going to do, actually before, what we're going to base it with is actually just tube sand. I'll show you guys. Just regular tube sand. You could buy a big old tube of it for truck beds and whatnot during the winter time. It's like, again, $2 for a 50-pound bag. Kind of can't beat it. This is basing on a budget. Alright, so we'll just take it. Now I don't water down this PVA, like I said. We're trying to not get it on the cork. We're just going to try to fill in the middle bits between the cork. And that's where the sand is going to settle. Now I kind of want to keep it just lower than the level of the cork, so I just want this glue to be just a little bit more shallow. What's good about this Mod Podge is that it actually holds its own pretty well, and it isn't too runny. So we can just kind of put it in there, slap it on. If it gets them on the skull, I'm just going to let it run down, and then I'm going to wipe it off. We'll clean that up later, not a big deal. So we'll just dip this in. You kind of want the mouthpiece and stuff like that to be full. Like I said, you kind of want to fill up the skull to make it look like it's kind of sunken into the ground. Keep going with this. I said if you get a little bit on the cork, not a big deal, but we just don't want to cover it completely. I'm actually not going to base the cork at all. Take these edges here, fill in these. I'm just gotta get this one last edge. Okay. Do a little bit more over here. A little bit more over here. That looks pretty good. Drop that in my water. So see, that's what we got. So we're gonna take the sand. We're just gonna dump it on there, just like that. So I'm going to let this sit in the sand for probably about 5 minutes. We kind of want to keep it just contained. I just want it to dry just a little bit. I mean, it's going to take a while for this Mod Podge to dry, but I just want it to sit a little bit, get the sand up. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'll be back, and then we'll show you what to do. We'll clean up the sand and whatnot, and I'll show you a couple more steps that I did. Alrighty guys, so I was sitting in the sand for about 5 minutes just to kind of let it settle down, and as you can see, it's pretty well covered. It'll run probably a little bit once you get in the sand. Just try to be delicate when you put it in there, but it's still going to kind of run on these edges here, as you can see. If I can get the camera to focus. So it'll kind of run on the edges. Once that fully dries, we'll clean that off. I'll just scrape it down with the X-Acto knife. We'll call it a day. As you can see, the little skull's kind of popping out there. He's kind of engulfed, not fully engulfed though. You kind of want to make it look like he's barely up there. He's been there for a while. So the last thing I want to do, before this glue completely dries, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of make some divots inside the actual sand bits to make it look like it's kind of cracked, sort of. It's going to, instead of being one smooth surface, it's going to have little ridges and stuff like that. So all you do is just take the end of your paintbrush, and you're just going to try to push holes into it. Just kind of trying to manipulate the earth here. And then a little bit of glue is going to pop through, which is alright. So what we'll do, so you kind of want high spots, you kind of want low spots here. So you can see a little bit of the glue kind of started poking through again, so you just take it, put it in the sand. Shake off the excess, and then there you go. So then it's covered. So now we see there's some, you probably can't see it very well, but there's some high spots, there's some low spots. Yeah, the lighting's not that great, but so there's some high spots, there's some low spots. You don't want it to be all even. So what I'm going to do is, at this point, you're going to want to let it dry overnight. Like I said, there's quite a bit of Mod Podge on this actual base that it's going to take a little while to dry. So overnight would be the best, just to be safe. Once it's done overnight, I'm going to scrape off the excess on the sides of the bases, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually prime it black. It's just normal Rust-Oleum flat black primer. I don't use anything special from GW or anything like that. It's just flat black primer. So when we come back, I'll have this cleaned up, I'll have it primed, and then we'll go into giving it some color and giving it some depth. Alrighty guys, so we got our base fully primed. I see I primed in black, got the sand dried up, so you can see here's what it looks like. We got the skull right there. Again, camera bit light kind of questionable. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I will say, normally it depends on how you want to do it. I do this after I prime it. I think it adds a little more depth, and I don't think I think the primer would block it. But you probably could do it before. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut lines into the cork. So in here and here and here, I'm going to make it kind of cobblestoney. So basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my X-Acto knife here, and then we're just going to basically, I usually just use the butt, and we just kind of push little lines into it, just to make it look like it's kind of like a cobblestone sort of thing. So I'm going to push these into here, just kind of like this. We're going to work around, and then what we're going to do at the very end is I'm going to fill the crevices in with black, and then that's going to kind of add the color back into it. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of this. I'll show you what it's like done, and then we'll go from there. Alrighty guys, so I got the holes inside the cobblestone. Now we're going to talk about color schemes now, because this is where we're actually getting into painting. Very first of all, it's going to be really easy. Besides me filling back in these little crevice lines with black, all of this is going to be dry brushed, besides, I guess, the skull. The skull's going to be painted, skull color. So what we'll do first, I'll touch on the base, and then we'll paint the skull afterwards, and I'll show you what to do with that. First things first, for the black, I'm just using Vallejo black. It doesn't really matter, doesn't matter which one you use. A bad and black would work if you want to use Citadel. Or honestly, with this kind of stuff, you could probably pick up the 99-cent cheap paint if you really wanted to. On top of that, so once we paint it black, what we're going to do is we're going to dry brush the whole thing in Eschen Gray. That is the first one. We're just going to give, we're going to give a dark gray to the whole base, basically, is the plan. And then, yeah, so we'll start with the whole base on Eschen Gray. Then for the cobblestone bits, what we're going to do is we're going to do a lighter dry brush of Dawnstone. That's going to make it kind of pop away from the rest of the sand bits. kind of give a little color or I don't even know what I'm talking. Making it basically stand out away from the sand. We're just trying to make it, pop a little more. And then on top of that, where that green color is going to come from is I'm going to very lightly dry brush this in wog flesh. This is going to give it it gives it that weird sickly feeling that makes it look almost nuclear, sort of, but not, too bad. And then what we do, actually, to make it even more kind of iridescent, is I actually wash the cobblestone lines in Beltan green. So I kind of wash the whole cobblestone in green, that way that it kind of gives it more of that glossiness to it, too. It just adds a little more to it. Now for the sand bits, what we're going to do is we're just going to dry brush it lightly with Mournfang Brown. Super simple, just light dry brush of that. And then I wash a little bit of the Agrax, just to kind of cut back a little bit on the black, make it a little more brown. So we'll get started on that real quick. I'm going to get my paintbrush, going to get everything going. So first things first, I'm going to paint the black recesses. There are these recesses back into here. What's good about this, actually, is the primer and this paint color is actually different. So it kind of gives it a little more depth. I actually kind of like the fact that it's kind of a slightly different brown, or different black, because it kind of sticks out a little bit different. It gives it a little bit more, added flavor to it. So I'm just going to get the lines that I've got there, paint these lines here. Going to do this quickly, that way I don't have to do a seam cut or anything like that. You don't have to be super neat about it, just kind of, you're trying to get it into those crevices and whatnot. So just dig your brush. I wouldn't use any brush that's useful in any sort of way. This is just a cheapo brush that I got from I think it was from Hobby Lobby or Walmart or something like that. Just something cheap, something. You don't want to use a good brush on any of this, really. I mean, it's terrain. You don't want to overdo it. So we're going to get that done. Alright, so that one's good in there. I'm going to get these in here. Now, on this part, it depends on if you want to do this. I don't think you necessarily have to do this cobblestone part. I think it just adds a little bit more texture. If you wanted to keep it with the straight cork, kind of make it like slabs or so, concrete slabs, stone slabs, something like that. If you wanted a little more solid, less broken up, that should be fine too. Just kind of, basting is one of those things where you just kind of got to play around with it and do what you think fits. I like the cobblestone. I like adding a little bit more texture to it. And so that's what I'm going to do. So while that's drying, we'll go ahead. I'll get my dry brush out. So as you can see, all the black is pretty much filled. There's still a little bit of brown left over, but the dry brush should take care of that too. But if not, I mean, even still, it looks kind of good. It kind of gives a little color pop to it. So let me go ahead and get my Eshin Gray. Shake this up. Of course, with dry brushing, what you want to do is you want to always make sure you put a little bit on your brush and then wipe it off on a paper towel to where you don't have a lot. I mean, this is kind of where we're at right now. I just want it very light. I don't really want this too heavy. I kind of want to keep this black because the black kind of gives it that desecrated sort of look. So we'll just go in here, just start dry brushing this up. The whole point is to do this in layers. You don't want to. It's a buildup of color. You don't want to do it all heavy all at once, because then it's just going to kind of eat at you. It'll get carried away, and you don't want that to happen. So we're going to dry brush all of this here. Not too worried about the sand. Sand bits, like I said, are going to be brown, so the gray is not really 100% necessary, but I just added a little bit more texture to it. So I'll hit that here. Okay. There we go. Not a whole lot of color, but it's starting to get there. You can see it in the camera now how light picks up that gray a little better than the black. So it's going to start giving that definition. Alright, so then I'm going to wash this brush here. Make sure this is nice and dry before we go over the Dawnstone. Always make sure your brush is dry. I find that with dry brushing, I mean, even when you dip it in water, you gotta really dry it off. Alright, so we got our Dawnstone. Now, Dawnstone's gonna be even lighter. This color is very bright, so you don't really want it to kill it. You don't want to overkill it here, because it'll really get away from you. So we're just doing this on the cobblestone part. We're just hitting the heavy bits here. See, I'm going very light on this. Just enough to pick up with definition. And see, now that gray is picking up all those holes that we put in the cobblestone, making it look like cracked stone, basically. So there we go. So now that's with the Dawnstone on there. Now, for the final dry brush layer of Wog Flesh. Now this is going to be even lighter than the gray. You really don't, we don't want to make this look green necessarily. We want it to be black. We want it to look like stone. We just want to give it that weird sort of iridescent look. So I mean, I get this really, really light. Try to really take it off. I mean, I didn't use like barely any here. So we'll do this. Probably do a little bit more here. But you really, really don't want to go overboard with this green, because then it's just going to look weird. Alright, there we go. That's the kind of color I'm looking for. Just enough to break it. Because really a lot of the green also comes from the wash as well. You'd be surprised how much that Beltane green can really add to it. Alright, so now you see there's a green in there. There's the gray. You can see it. You can see it on the camera. I know the lighting's pretty bad, but you can actually see that tinge of green in there. This camera didn't suck so bad. Come on, focus. Sorry guys, I'm trying to get this to focus. But I'll get the focus later. So, that's that. And then we'll do the wash real quick. And I'm going to actually take the same brush that I used to fill in the black. I'm just going to take this wash, Beltane green. And I just hit the recesses on these. I don't do the tops of them. All I do is I'm going to hit the cracks. I'll show you. So we're just going to hit the cracks here, and I kind of go a little heavy on this, just to, so you see how that color kind of brings out. Let's go ahead. See, and the wash is going to take care of those brown bits as well. I'll show you after I get done with this one here real quick how this kind of looks. And I don't do around the edges of the black because I want it to look like, you know, the sand is kind of coming up over the stone. So I definitely don't hit these. I literally just hit these in the creases that I created. Alright, there we go. So now you can kind of see, I know the lighting's not the greatest, but it's got this, it kind of makes it pop. You can see the green a lot better than what you normally would, but it definitely still looks like stone. So we're going to finish up with the rest of these quick. That with there. That with there. There we go. So I'll call that done for the stone. Now I'm going to do the dry brushing of the Mournfang. Go back to my dry brushing brush. this really good and dry. Now this you don't want to be too heavy. I mean, you want the brown to stick, but like I said before, I feel like a broken record, but you want to keep the black. You want to make sure that that black is kind of there. So we'll just hit little bits of it here and there, just to kind of offset this black a little bit. Like these stones with the brown. This with the brown. There we go. It's looking pretty brown, and I'm actually not going to wash this with Agrax. You can if you want to. I'm actually not gonna. I think it's actually got a decent color right now. I kind of like the black in there. I kind of like. Keep going. I think it's got enough brown color. I don't think that Agrax is going to take it away from it. And I think I like this brown. It's going to be kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can. This one gets a second light here. Let's see if I can give it a hand here. So hard to see. So you can see there's a little bit of brown on here. Let's see if I can get it. I mean, I'm under a fluorescent light, but there's a little bit of brown. You don't use a whole lot of brown, but it stands out. I mean, it really actually turns out pretty well. You'll see once you're actually doing it. So yeah, so what's left is I'm going to paint the skull. I just paint it like a traditional skull that you normally would. What I use is I'll highlight with a screaming skull. Actually, what I do on this one, I actually lied. What I'll do is I'll hit it with an Ushbati bone. When I hit it with the Ushbati bone, I actually dry wash it, or not dry wash it. I wash it in Agrax 3 times. I make it really dark because you want it to make it look like it is sitting in the dirt for a really long time. And then I'll take one after you'll let them dry 15 minutes between each, and then hit it with the Ushbati for highlights, and then you should be good to go. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll paint the skull. I'll show you how it looks when it's all done, and then we'll do a call. We'll call a recap. All right, thanks, guys. All right, guys, it is finished, I think. So here is the final product. There we go. So you could see the green. You could see a little bit of the brown. You could see the skeleton. The final wash is actually fully drying. You can see that there's a nice skeleton skull right there. It's a nice break. Yeah, so it's really simple. If you wanted to add a few more things, I could think maybe even like a tuft of dead grass if you really wanted to. I kind of don't. I'm not a giant fan of dead grass. Also, you can paint the actual bottom of the base fully black. Some people are a little nitpicky about that. So yeah, I think that's it. If you do have any questions, just go ahead and let me know. But other than that, this is I'm going to call this one done. This would be used to fit on pretty much anybody that can go on a base. Space Marines, like I said, I'm going to be using them for AdMechs. I think it's just a nice, cool, simple way to do it with not a lot of money. I mean, it's super simple, super cheap. You can make these easily. The only thing that's going to be hard is finding skeleton bits, but you could even still, let's say you can use skeleton arms, skeleton legs. I mean, you can use zombie heads. I mean, the list is endless. The bigger the base you have, the more ability that you have, the more space that you got. So yeah, give it a shot. If like I said, thanks for watching, appreciate it.